My name is Alex Amancio. I'm the creative director on Assassin's Creed Unity.
Obviously, the new Assassin's Creed, the focus is on co-op. Can you just talk about the co-op elements? Because it's not a co-op story, right? But there are co-op elements in there that you can just play with 2 players, 4 players, etc., right?
Exactly. And I mean, when we first started developing our co-op, we didn't know what co-op for Assassin's Creed meant. Co-op can obviously mean many different things. I mean, the world can act as a co-op aggregator by, throwing a lot of challenge at you. You can use artificial gating. When, you need to be 2 players to turn these levers at once to open the door. And we very soon realized that none of this was what we wanted for Assassin's Creed. What we actually wanted was to take the new-gen version of the single player that we're actually building and have you be able to share that experience with up to 3 friends. And we started experimenting with different mission types, and we realized another thing very quickly, that linear missions, repetitive missions did not work. They were not fun. You could play them once, but then you were done. So this started us on experimenting with larger, more open missions with very simple objectives, but like maybe 3 3 different beats to the mission. Which led to our black box design, which then got transferred to single player, which was sort of a little bit of a callback to the Assassin's Creed 1 or large-scale assassination missions, which we'll talk about later. So essentially, we started like that. We started like designing our missions and trying to figure out what was good, what wasn't good. Another thing we realized didn't work was the fact that if you linked co-op missions narratively, the problem is that, for example, you're playing with your buddies, right? And one day you can't play. And when you go back to playing the next day, they're 2 sequences ahead. What do? Do you fast forward, or they replay stuff they've already played? So we came to the conclusion that making each co-op mission standalone story was the best way to do it. Very broad story, interesting, it's fun. It doesn't matter if you rewatch it. The way we set up our narrative or cinematics are much more like a film trailer. And then we went from there. So we actually ended up with 2 types of co-op missions. The first one is the Brotherhood missions. These are large-scale black box missions. You can approach them from any direction. You can really play them and replay them different ways. And they're always centered around a strong historical character and or a strong historical event and landmark. And then we have the heist missions, which are stealth missions. And they're based on the idea that you need to sneak into an area, find the loot, and then exit without being detected. Every time you play them, they're a little different because the chest is in a different location. Guard paths are different. Some doors are open, others are closed. So it really gives you a little sense of surprise every time. And even though they're cooperative, there's a little bit of a cool competitive element to them because you have your loot bar. Every time you get spotted, that loot bar goes down. But every player's loot bar is different, and you can only see your own. So you're always guessing whether, am I playing better or are my buddies playing better? And then at the end, we actually reveal everybody's loot bar, and then you get to know who won. So it gives you that little edge when you play.
Do you ever think, for the reason you were just talking about then about the narrative aspect, do you ever think there will be an Assassin's Creed that is co-op? Or is it better for these kind of isolated events that aren't really that narratively linked together?
It's a good question, and we thought about it for a while. And one thing we didn't want to do was we didn't want to build a game that was that sort of didn't respect the core DNA of what we had established as Assassin's Creed. Right? Assassin's Creed is very well known as being a very narrative brand with very intricate stories, very cool characters. So we wanted to preserve that, and we discovered very quickly that trying to integrate co-op into that wasn't exactly the best approach. I mean, it might be one of the weaknesses of the Gears of War co-op, for example, where you can miss parts of the story, right, when you join back. We decided very quickly that maybe we were just looking at the situation wrong. Previous AC games, the main narrative was probably the main sort of driving force of getting you through the game, which not only did it not really work with what we wanted to do with co-op, but it actually doesn't work very well with open world, the open world concept in general, because the narrative story is trying to push you forward, right? And the open world is trying to get you to explore. Those 2 things don't mesh well. And even when you look at heat maps of previous games you have highways. And these highways are sort of like linear levels within the open world. And this is exactly what the narrative drives you to do. When you look at a heat map from Unity, it's chaos. And the reason for this is exactly this change that we brought upon. And the change actually involves changing the main motivator from narrative to character progression. So the story that we're actually telling is the story of Arnaud's progression from novice to master assassin. The single player story, Arnaud's redemption quest, is part of it, but it's only part of it. The Brotherhood missions are missions that Arnaud did for the Assassin's Brotherhood that have to do with not his redemption quest. This is his 9 to 5, if you will. Yeah. It has to do with him and the assassins and what the assassins are doing within the revolution. And then you have other different stories that, you know, Arnaud can get interested in as just a regular person. Like there's a murder. I love Paris. I live here. Who killed this person? I'm an assassin. I can, you know, resolve this. Or it might be a contract that you're doing for the Brotherhood. The contracts are no longer what they were before, where you just have a, you know, red dot on the map that you have to stab and then it's done. These are actual deep stories, and they involve sometimes protecting somebody, sometimes killing somebody. It can be anything. And you even have these different treasure hunts. These Nostradamus quests where you just go around, follow clues, and just the next step, and then you get a treasure at the end. So the way that you are running around the city and performing all of these things, that's the narrative. This is the meta-narrative. It's your narrative. It's not mine. It's not the one that I crafted or the team crafted. This is the one that the player is crafting. And this is, I think, very new gen. And how to make all of that relevant, and this is when we go back to Arnaud's progression being the link of everything. Because Arnaud has skills and gear, and by performing his you know, single-player redemption quest, you unlock groups of skills. By performing Brotherhood missions, for example, you get skill points that you can use to buy skills. Other missions will give you money that you can use to buy gear and weapons. Other missions will actually give you gear or weapons. And all of these elements will help you progress Arnaud in a way where it reinforces the way you want to play the game, right?
Do those skills then transfer into the co-op?
Yeah.
So if you buy a sword, that's where you buy it in the single player and it goes to the co-op, right?
Exactly, because it's all in the same city. Paris is a 3D representation of your progression, and Arnaud is your progression, right? So everything you do within the city is all part of the same seamless experience, and Arnaud is the hub of everything. He's the one that converges all of that stuff. His progression represents your path through the game, through Paris.
Okay, so co-op in, competitive multiplayer out.
Yeah.
What was the reason for that? Was it either or? Was it all about time and resources kind of thing?
Well, I mean, it's a little bit about that, but it's also about the fact that when we first began thinking about the game, well, we knew, yeah, it's going to be the first fully next-gen Assassin's Creed, and we knew we wanted to revamp multiplayer. We knew we wanted to reinvent it, because one thing we didn't like about the previous one, it was an awesome game, but it was a separate game. This was its problem, right? We really wanted to create a unified experience, no pun intended with the title, but we really wanted to create a unified experience, and we didn't want to have two games within the same disc. One that you know relied on you know, all of these mechanics that you spent a lot of time working on, and then load a different game that relies on a completely different set of mechanics and even different visuals. So we started thinking about how we could integrate multiplayer into the game. We looked at competitive. We looked at co-op. Co-op is something we've been wanting to do for a very long time. I mean, I could tell you that we've been wanting to do this since AC1, okay, wow. For real. We looked at what fans have been wanting, and the number one thing when we asked fans, what would you like to see in an Assassin's Creed game, was co-op. Second one was customization. And so, I mean, we're like, yeah, I think co-op makes more sense. Plus, you're an assassin. If we can, you know, get other players. See, we've had the Brotherhood before, you know, that you automatically call people to come and help you during a mission. What if those were actually real people, your friends? So it just seemed like a logical evolution for us. Whereas competitive multiplayer was a little harder to explain. Who are you playing? Are you playing assassins against Templars? If you're playing Templars, do they have a different set of skills? And what happens if, you know, then you choose one side? Can you not change again? Like, what if your friends, you want to play with them, but oh, you chose a Templar, we can't play together. So it just opened up a lot of different questions that we didn't necessarily want to answer right away. And plus, again, we so much wanted to do co-op that it was just, we jumped at the opportunity, really.
It's not the end for multiplayer, right? It's just Unity doesn't have it, and then
Exactly.
somewhere down the line.
Who knows? We'll see what the other core teams that work on the next game and the next, feel like doing and where the brand is taking them. But for us, it's all about that seamless experience centered on Arno. Single player, co-op, hundreds of side quests, progression based on Arno.
Do you think there's a market there for, you said you didn't want separate games on one disc. Is there a market there to sell it as a separate product, maybe at a cheaper price?
There might be, and I mean...
Because it's much loved, right? I mean...
It is.
It's got a big following.
It is, and it's a very polished game. I have to say that design-wise, it's very polished and it's very well balanced, which is very challenging to do in any competitive game, right? So there might be, and I don't know, like who knows? Who knows what the future will hold?
Recently, you announced your DLC plans and your add-on.
Yeah.
Can you just talk a little bit about and where those came from?
Okay, so our DLC, I mean, obviously we have a new adventure featuring Arno in a different location close to Paris. And this is something we've essentially been doing traditionally for a very long time, these types of DLCs. Excuse me. And then we have this new sort of side-scroller featuring Xiaojun, which we introduced in Revelations with a little animated short called Embers. And I mean, this has been in the works for the past a little bit over a year, I'd say. It stemmed from the idea that we have so many different characters, so many different universes, and we only have so many HD games that we can produce. And we really wanted to explore these different places and characters. And one thing we wanted to do with this side-scroller was we wanted to try out really different, very ambitious art styles. And when we looked at choosing which setting and which character we would choose, like Xiaojun came to mind because she's Chinese and the game would be set in China. And we felt that Chinese ink art was a really cool thing to try out. Can we actually pull it off and have something that looks really, really cool artistically? And that's sort of where the idea came from.
So a lot of people, when they heard there's an Assassin's Creed game set in China, super excited, and then noticed it was the 2.5D platformer. Yeah. Were you surprised by that reaction? Because a lot of people have been calling out for China, feudal Japan for a long time. Is that a little bit of a tease for what might come for the future?
It might. I mean, again, we have all of these different characters. I mean, we have Nikolai Orlov, right? Russian, revolutionary Russia, another amazing setting, for an HD game. Who knows? Like, now that all these characters are established and we're starting to have our own pantheon of assassins and all these things, only the future knows what the next HD games will hold.
So you started this game from scratch, essentially. So you rewrote a lot of the free running and stuff like that, and the combat. The combat still feels, and the free running feels very familiar. Was that done on purpose, or were you tempted just to get rid of it and start anew, or was it one of your aims to make it feel familiar?
Yeah, we wanted to really, walk that line of making it familiar and yet making it sort of a real evolution, not an increment, but a real jump ahead, right? Our combat now is based more on strategy. So before you could essentially counter pretty much and counter kill maybe 20 guards. That doesn't work anymore. And, it's more based on fencing, this new combat. So essentially you can, strike, dodge, block, parry. And depending on who you're facing and what weapon they're using and how skillful the enemy is, you need to adapt your strategy. For example, if somebody's attacking you with a heavy hammer, for example, then blocking might not be the best idea because that will actually cost you half a second as you block, which is a window for maybe another guard to attack you. But if you move out of the way, the weight of the weapon will actually buy you half a second, which you can then use to counter and then kill that enemy. So on the surface, it might look familiar, which is the goal, right? We don't want to alienate all of these different players. But once you get past the surface and you start reaching that layer of becoming better and mastering the combat, then you notice that it's actually a very deep mechanic. It's the same thing for the navigation, right? Somebody else was telling me today that, when I started playing, I felt, wasn't too familiar and it felt a little clunky. And then I realized that I needed to play it differently. And as soon as that happened, like says, it's such a fluid experience and a natural organic experience. But that's the whole point. Our previous navigation system was very, it was designed to make everybody feel like a master from the start, right? Which by design removes the possibility of you actually being able to improve and that depth. This navigation system, I think, has actual depth, and people can actually very naturally just start playing and feel their progression and become better and start doing cooler stuff with their character, which is, again, is something that we try to do, right? Make it seem familiar, but then have that depth, and then realize that, wait a minute, this is different. I can actually become better and master this stuff and become, do all of these, really cool moves.
It's funny you mentioned the progress of the character to actually becoming, like, starting off as a bit of a newbie and then becoming this big assassin. Because in previous Assassin's Creed games, years gone by, you've given all the abilities from the start, the double assassination, the air assassination, double assassination. This time you've locked it until after sequence 5, I do believe, and you have to pay to unlock it. For years you've kind of given this to players, and now you're taking it away. I mean, were you ever conscious that that might cause a little bit of a rift?
Well, yeah, but you know what?
Because the first time I saw it, I was like, what? I want to kill these two guys by jumping on their head.
But the thing is, because we give you so much different, before the missions were pretty linear, right? So, I mean, we set it up so that you arrive here and there's 2 guards, and look, it's a good opportunity, double assassinate them, right? But now the idea is that the mission is so open-ended. There's so much stuff you can do that by actually allowing you to unlock stuff in layers, it actually not forces, it helps the players realize the openness and the variety and actually explore this. If you give them, it might sound counterintuitive, but if you give everything, people will just pick their 2 favorites and just repeat that. But by encouraging them to sort of have a restricted number of tools and then opening up the possibilities, you realize that this is actually a different experience. You can actually play this game the way you want to play it. Maybe you buy a different skill. Maybe you're used to doing the double assassination. Maybe you're going to focus a little bit more on stuff that will help you hide better in the crowd and discover a whole new different way of playing the game that maybe suits you better, that you had never even knew existed. And that's the whole point. So the game will be out November 13th on Xbox One, PS4, and PC.